Every horror fan knows the movie The Amityville Horror. But what if I told you that a terrifying story wasn't just a product of Hollywood imagination? In the small town of Amityville, where life was supposed to be simple and safe, there was a house that looked just like any other. But it would end up being the stage for one of the most horrifying crimes that ever took place. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Weirded Out. Today we are covering the DeFeo family murders and the infamous hauntings that happened a year later that inspired the book and movie The Amityville Horror. So if you like true crime and other mysterious and dark stories, subscribe now so you never miss an episode. So let's get started. In the lovely town of Amityville, New York, there stood a seemingly idyllic Dutch colonial house at 112 Ocean Avenue. The house was built in the early 1920s, and in 1965 the DeFeo family would call it a home. Louise and Ronald DeFeo were so excited to get out of their cramped Brooklyn apartment and finally live in a big house. They were filled with hopes and dreams as they settled in this new house, which they affectionately nicknamed High Hopes. They even hung a sign with the name at the entrance of the house as a symbol of literally the hope and aspirations that they saw for the future of their family. But unfortunately, those hopes would end up being overshadowed by really dark events that turned their perfect new home into literally the plot of a horror movie. So the DeFeo family history is quite interesting. Louise and Ronald met when they were both young. They were really attractive young people and they were both really interested in starting a family. So when they met each other, they clicked really fast and they really quickly got married. But Louise's parents, for some reason, didn't approve of her relationship with Ronald, so they cut all ties with the couple until someone else came along into the family that got them all together again. And on September 26 of 1951, Louise and Ronald have their very first child, Ronald Jr., who was also nicknamed Butch. And the family grew really quickly. They soon would be a really big household with a dog, Shaggy, and 5 other kids: Butch, Dawn Teresa, Allison Louise, Mark Gregory, and John Matthew. And to outsiders, the DeFeos were the perfect family. They were really kind people, hardworking, and nobody really had anything bad to say about them. They were nice neighbors, really good people in general. So when they moved into 112 Ocean Avenue, they just seemed like this normal family just moving into a new neighborhood. But behind closed doors, things were very different. Ronald Sr. was reportedly to be extremely abusive to his wife and kids, and his eldest son, Butch, would be the biggest target for his rage. And Ronald's temper would become almost like a curse to the family, ruining a lot of their most special moments. One day, the entire family was gathered watching TV when out of nowhere, Ronald just flipped and he got baby Butch and shoved him across the room so strongly that he hit his head and shoulders on the wall. And this kind of occurrence became really regular in their home, and as you can imagine, as a consequence, Butch grew up with a really troubled relationship with his father. But Butch wasn't only suffering at home, he was also having a really hard time at school. He was bullied a lot for being overweight, and kids would call him a lot of different names, such as the Blob, Bucky Beaver, and Pork Chop. And because of this, he would pick a lot of fights with other kids in school because he's also started developing quite a temper. So he wouldn't just take all the bullying, he would fight back, and his dad, Ronald, would actually encourage him to fight back. But it got to a point that his aggression and his temper was getting really extreme, and he was fighting almost every day in school and at home with his parents and his siblings. So Louise and Ronald decide to bring him to a therapist to try and figure out why he's acting the way and what's going on. But it's quite obvious to me, it all starts in the home, right? But as soon as they got to the therapist, Butch just refused any sort of psychological treatment. He blatantly told the therapist that it was a waste of time and that he wasn't going to show up anyways. So the family just gives up on trying to find professional help for him, and instead they decide to start giving him money to calm him down. And they even buy him a lot of extravagant gifts, like one time they bought him a $14,000 speedboat, and whatever they were thinking that this was gonna do, maybe try to make him happier because he was getting money, I don't know, but certainly it didn't work. And you're probably wondering, what does this family do for a living in order to be able to afford such expensive gifts for their son? And they didn't have any incredible jobs. Ronald Sr. actually worked as a dealership manager at his stepfather's dealership. So how could they afford all of this? Well, the reason why they could afford the house, their lifestyle, and giving allowances to their son is because of Luis's father, Michael Brigante, who basically gave them everything. So, like I said, he provided the job for the family in his own dealership, but also he was giving them money for many different things. He helped them buy the house, but also he paid $50,000 for family portraits to get done, and those portraits were all around the house, and they, I don't know, knowing what happened, they look really unsettling when you see them. But yeah, they're kind of strange and they're so expensive. But yeah, yes, he spent $50,000 on those weird portraits. But the reason why it's really strange that Michael is the one supporting this family is because it's reported that he had connections with the mob. He was apparently an associate of the Gambino crime family boss, Carlos Gambino, and he assisted them on many different crimes, even going as far as helping them dispose of bodies. So yeah, this whole family is already really strange and suspicious, and there's definitely some sketchy things going on. But going back to Butch, all this money that he's getting from his parents, the salary from the dealership, the gifts, and also an allowance he would get from his parents, he would not use that for anything good whatsoever. He decided to start buying drugs and alcohol. And it got so bad that by the time he was 17 years old, he was heavily addicted to drugs, and really, really heavy drugs. And as you can imagine, this made his relationship with his father much worse, and also his mental health. And also by this time, he had lost a lot of weight, and he was a really tall guy, so he used all of this to his advantage when picking fights with other guys. So that behavior would continue and get worse as time went by, with his temper and aggression towards other people and also the family. And Butch and his father would fight almost every single day, and in multiple occasions, Butch threatened to kill his father. There was even one time where he pulled a firearm at him, and he didn't shoot him, no one got hurt, but still, this is just a big example of how much hostility and how crazy the situation actually was in that home. Imagine how horrible it must have been growing up in that situation, being the siblings, the younger siblings of Butch, and watching this happen every single day, and also suffering from the dad's temper. It's just, I can't even imagine it. It must have been horrifying. And something else should have been done to try and get Butch under control, and also Ronald should have gotten better, but of course, I'm sure that he wouldn't admit that he was to blame as well for his son's behavior. But instead, they just keep giving him more and more money and just ignoring the situation and just continuously fighting every single day. And apart from buying drugs and alcohol, Butch also used a lot of the money to buy a lot of weapons. So he made a stash of firearms in his bedroom where he would just hide those from his parents. And I guess he was planning to use them for some reason on a later date. But yeah, very strange. And also, there was really nothing good going on in his life. Butch had to work at his dad's dealership. He hated it. He barely even showed up for work. He had a terrible time at home. And also, I'm sure his friends weren't really great company either, as he would just spend all of his time in bars with his friends, so he wasn't really doing anything productive. And even though he was getting that salary and allowance from his dad, he still wanted more money. So one day he went to work at the dealership and faked a robbery in order to steal money from his own family business. But he ended up not getting in a lot of trouble because of it, and nothing happened. They just moved on from it. Now, the relationship between siblings was also not great whatsoever. They were fighting as well between each other, and there was also the abuse from the dad. But Dawn, one of Butch's sister, who was closer to his age, was the one that he would fight with the most. And she also started having a lot of arguments with her family when she started dating a guy when she was 18. And this guy, well, he was not a good person at all. He was also very violent and also used a lot of drugs. So, not much different from the man in her family. But yeah, her parents didn't approve of it, and they had fights a lot, all the time, about this relationship. So as you can see, this scenario you can imagine at this home is very toxic. The fighting, the arguments, the absolutely horrible way that this family interacts, but nobody would have imagined what would happen next. At this point, the stage was set for a horrific crime that would change the family's history and the house's history forever. So on November 13th of 1974, Butch met his friends at a bar after his day at work. And just like a normal day, they're just hanging out and drinking when at some point Butch decides to call home for some reason, but nobody's answering. So he tells his friends that he's really worried because his family is not picking up the phone, and he keeps calling them over and over, and everyone is looking at him really confused, what's happening, and he just tells them, I need to go home, I need to check it out because nobody's answering, I'm starting to get really worried. So he gets up and leaves. But a few hours later, Butch comes back and he looks absolutely distraught. He is desperately screaming, help, someone help, my family got shot, someone shot my parents. And he falls to his knees crying. It's a terrible thing to look at. So his friends obviously get really worried at him, and one of his closest friends, Bob, tell him, okay, let's go back to the house with you and see what's going on. So they get in the car, immediately leave, and Bob is speeding and just trying to get to the house as quick as possible. And as soon as they walk in, all they can hear is the dog Shaggy barking non-stop. They see that all the lights are off, but the parents' car is in the driveway, so they definitely were at home. And they start walking up the stairs, and straight away this horrible rotten smell comes towards them. So Bob is the one leading the group, and upstairs he goes straight into the parents' bedroom. He pushes the door open and he sees Louise and Ronald lying face down on the bed. And at first he doesn't realize what is happening because it looks like they're just sleeping. But he sees bullet holes on their back, and that's when he realizes they're dead. So then they walk to the other rooms and they find Butch's siblings, John, Mark, and Allison, also lying face down on their beds and also shot. They then go downstairs to where Dawn is sleeping and find her in the exact same position, but a little bit differently this time. She wasn't shot on the back, her face was shot. So now a lot of questions start to rise. Were they all shot while they were sleeping? Why were they all lying face down? And even weirder, Mark, one of the siblings, had recently had a football injury and he couldn't sleep face down because of it. So there is absolutely no way that he would have slept that way on purpose. So it looks like someone put them in that position for whatever reason. And why was it that Dawn was the only one with her face shot and everyone else was shot on the back? So who could have possibly done this and what was the motive? So of course they call 911, and as soon as investigators get to the scene, the first thing they do is talk to Butch, right? Because he's the only survivor of his family, so he must know something. He must have an idea of who could have wanted to kill his entire family. And Butch actually gives a very quick answer. He tells the investigators that his family has been targeted by the mob, and instantly the police believes him because everyone kind of knows about the DeFeo families and Louise's parents and their connection with the mob. So to them, it seemed like it was possible. So they take Butch into the station as a way to protect him in case whoever killed his family would come for him next. But as soon as they start actually investigating the crime scene and the events, they notice that this story just doesn't line up. So they start questioning Butch about everything that he done that day. So he explains that he had been in work all morning and then with friends all afternoon until he called home, realized no one is answering, went home and then found his family brutally murdered. But after the autopsy, the police quickly figured out that they had been murdered early that morning. So at that time, Butch was still at home. So why was he lying? Why was he telling them that he wasn't at home? The investigators want to push him a little bit because they don't think they're gonna get a quick answer from him. So they start questioning him again about this so-called mob hitman that he says killed his family. And they ask him, okay, who is it? Do you know him? Do you know his name? And Butch tells them that his name was Luis Fellini and that he had lived with the family very briefly and that there was a dispute between him and his father, and for some reason that dispute caused him to want to kill him and also the entire family. So police obviously went and called up this Luis Fellini guy, and yeah, he was a mob hitman, but he had an alibi. At the time of the murder, he wasn't even in New York. He was out of town. And not only that, but the killing of children actually violates the Italian mafia code, so he wouldn't have killed children. So there's no reason why it would have been him. So at this point, it became very clear to the police that Butch's timeline just didn't add up whatsoever and that he must have been hiding something. So they go back to the house and they keep searching and they find Butch's stash of weapons. And that's why they find a firearm that actually matches one of the bullets that was left under the parents' bed. So at this point, they are starting to think that he is the killer. So back at the station, they continue trying to pressure him to confess or say something. But Butch tells them a different story now. He goes on to say that he wasn't the one that killed his family, that he only killed his sister Dawn. He told them that his sister Dawn actually was the one that killed her parents and siblings because of the argument and fight that was going on about her boyfriend. And when he heard her sister doing this, he was scared that he was gonna be next, so he went and killed her first. And you know, that could kind of explain how Dawn was the only one with the face shot and not the back. Maybe Dawn went there and shot the dad and the mom on the back and then the other siblings. And as soon as Butch came up to her, they kind of faced each other and he shot her. But still, it's kind of weird to picture an 18-year-old girl being able to shoot so many people from the back while they're asleep. But the police are kind of confused and they keep questioning him until a point where he breaks. And that's when he fully confesses. It all started so fast once I just couldn't stop. So he told them that he murdered his entire family in cold blood, and after killing them, he decided to tuck them in bed and cover them with blankets, take a shower, get changed, and also trim his beard. Then he got a pillowcase, put all his bloody clothes and his murder weapon in the pillowcase, ditched the evidence in a storm drain in Brooklyn, and went to work. And after a few hours of work, he left early and went to the bar to meet his friends, and that's when he pretended to call home, then went home, pretended to be scared and to have witnessed his murdered family, and then you know everything else from here.
He came, he opened the door and he was screaming, "Come on, help me, somebody shot my mother and father." And everyone ran out of the bar and that was it. They all took off. No, I had to stay, I was tending bar. They all jumped in his car and took off.
Today, police combed the DeFeo's handsome three-story house for clues while divers explored the backyard swimming pool for the still unfound murder weapon. Police have been questioning the son Ronald and now say he is being, quote, safeguarded.
Well, I think they were just very sweet, very religious people, very family-minded people. And that's about all I could say. Very good, very generous, just tight. They're very close with their children.
There's one element in the usual mass murder story which seems to be missing from this case. There's no sense of fear in this community, no feeling of a mass murderer on the loose. People we talked to seem to feel that whatever was the motive for this crime, it had something to do with the family. It's not something that's going to return to bother anyone else.
And according to the New York Times article from 1975, Butch admitted to drugging his family during dinner the night before, so that could also explain why they were on the bed and how he was able to kill them without any of them waking up, because that is a very unsettling scene. Even if you see the crime scene photos, which I don't recommend, honestly, do what you want, but I wouldn't recommend. But if you see it, it's so unsettling seeing the way his family is lying in bed face down. And all you think is, how is it that the kids didn't wake up? How did they not get up from bed after hearing gunshots? But it explains that he poisoned them. But still, the only evidence that we have from this is from this article and what he said. And there's no actual scientific evidence from the autopsy that he actually poisoned his family. So if that's true or not, we'll never know. But even if he didn't, it's still really strange that the kids wouldn't get up after hearing the parents get shot. I understand that maybe they could have been frozen. If they were scared, they must have, I don't know, closed their eyes and thought that if they didn't move, it would just go away. But still, it's just a very eerie situation. And another thing that was really confusing for investigators was that all of their neighbors didn't hear a single gunshot. The only thing that they reported to hear was Shaggy barking, which they thought was normal because he did bark a lot. But nobody, not a single person heard a gunshot. So yeah, this entire case is very confusing and leaves us with a lot of questions, but it doesn't end here. That's when the whole paranormal conversation starts. So during the trial, Butch claimed that he was in the basement and he was really high on drugs while watching TV. And he started hearing the voice of his family members planning to kill him. He was convinced that those voices were real, that they were actually his family members planning to murder him. And he started also hearing other voices trying to warn him, telling him that he was going to die. I guess he must have been really out of his mind and in a kind of not thinking straight, but he claims to have seen this weird dark figure come towards him holding a rifle and telling him, "Do it now, kill them now." And he tells in the trial that this dark figure, was an entity, that it wasn't just something from his imagination, it was an actual spirit or a demon. He also said that during the killings, he looked at his mother and he didn't recognize her at all, that she looked like a completely different person. So he's trying really hard to give this defense that he wasn't guilty because he was possessed, that something made him do it, that this dark energy, this demon forced him to kill his family. A lot of people at the time believed him and a lot of people didn't. And still, there are a few people that believe him. But paranormal or not, there are definitely quite some strange gaps in the story. Like we just said, nobody was able to hear the shots, the way they were laying down, everything is really strange. But soon Butch would change his story again. He claims that him and his sister Dawn wanted to kill their parents together and that the whole plan was to just kill the parents. But she got out of control and started killing the siblings, so he decided to shoot her because he could have been next. So he keeps changing his story constantly, so it's very confusing. Nobody knows what the real motive was. If he done it alone, was he lying about his sister helping? Or did his sister actually help? Because kind of would make sense if she did, because one person being able to do all of this alone, I guess it is possible, but it would have been easier with two people. But still, there is not really any evidence that goes towards his sister doing any of this. So what was the actual cause of this? Were the drugs the cause? Was there really some evil paranormal entity that caused them to do this? Was it a plan with his sister to get rid of toxic parents? Or did he suffer from a mental illness, maybe, possibly, caused by the abuse from his parent? Maybe the amount of times where his parent hit him, that he hit his head as a kid. That is very possible that it could cause some sort of brain damage and trigger some type of mental illness. And it's all very confusing, and I guess we will never actually know the answers. But there are a few different theories. Like I said, there are people who still believe to this day that it was possession or some sort of evil spirit. There are people who believe it was a plan with his sister, and there are people who believe it was some type of mental illness like schizophrenia. But there are also speculations that Butch actually planned to kill his father because there was a life insurance on him for $200,000. And when he started actually killing, he decided to keep going and not actually stop. Again, there's no real proof to this, but in my opinion, it sounds like it's the most likely situation here. But in the end, his defense was trying to establish an insanity defense by claiming that he had dissociative disorder, which basically would cause him to experience life outside of his body, so he wouldn't have any control of his actions, and because of that he couldn't have been found guilty. However, the psychologists on the prosecutor side argued that he actually didn't have a dissociative disorder and that he actually suffered from antisocial disorder. And with that, he was fully aware of his actions, so he was 100% guilty. But after all of this, he was found guilty on all 6 counts of first-degree murder, and he was sentenced to 6 counts of 25 years to life. And still, after being arrested, he continued to change his story. He would tell everyone in his prison different versions of what happened. And I don't know why he was doing that, if he was trying to keep that act going of insanity or if he's trying to save himself somehow. But it's just very, very weird and messy, and nobody really believes anything he says because he just keeps changing it all the time. How are we gonna know if anything he says is true? So yeah, we'll never actually know what happened at 112 Ocean Avenue, but we can have some idea, but we'll never know for sure. But with Butch now in prison and the DeFeo family tragically gone, the house is now empty. But you're probably thinking, well, who in their right mind would ever want to move into a house where literally mass killings just happened? And I know, right? Yeah, I agree. I wouldn't I would absolutely not move there even if it was free. But well, George, Lutz, and his wife, Katie, well, they had a very different opinion. They were very excited when they saw the house on the market for a very nice price of $80,000. So they book an appointment to go view the house, and they fall in love straight away. Of course, I'm not surprised. It's a huge, beautiful house by the water. So yeah, I guess it is a beautiful house during the day. At night, it is terrifying. But they walk around to all the rooms, and after a few minutes viewing the house, they ask the real estate agent, what's the catch, right? Because there has to be one for $80,000. And the real estate agent says, well, okay, I'll tell you. So, you know the DeFeo family? Well, yeah, they were murdered here a year ago. But you would think, well, yeah, they're just gonna walk away now. They're not gonna buy the house. But they do buy the house. And they say, yeah, okay, of course, no problem. People got murdered. Sure, we'll move in. It's cheap, so it's fine. So in December of 1975, they buy the house and move in with their 3 children, 9-year-old Daniel, 7-year-old Christopher, and 5-year-old Missy, and also their dog Harry. And another really unsettling detail is that the house was still full of the DeFeo's furniture. There's even rumors that the bed frames that the Lutz family was sleeping in was the same bed frames that the DeFeo family slept in. Why would you do that? Why would you keep those furniture from literally people that got murdered? That's so weird. They said that after buying the house, the real estate agent said the furniture would come with for an extra $400. Like, again, I wouldn't even get the house for free. Imagine the furniture. I'm sorry, but that is crazy. And even if you don't believe in anything paranormal or not and whatever, still imagine like the weird energy in the house and just the feeling of living somewhere where people got killed or sleeping on the bed where they were killed. That's insane. But the Lutz family didn't actually have a very happy life in the house. Their time there was short-lived. They ended up running away after only 28 days of being there because they claimed that they were experiencing the most disturbing paranormal activity that would end up being inspiration for the Amityville horror book and later on the movie. So as soon as they moved in, one of George Lutz's friends suggested that they got a priest to come in and bless the house from all the evil spirits or something. And so a priest named Father Ray comes over shortly after they moved in, and as soon as he even looks at the house, he had a very unsettling feeling. But George says that once the priest entered the room where Dawn used to sleep, that's when everything got really strange. He warned the family to never ever sleep in that room or even enter the room. So yeah, the family agrees and says they're gonna use the room for something else, not a bedroom, but okay. And the priest continues walking around each room of the house, blessing the house, when he suddenly feels this force hitting him in the face, like as if someone was literally punching him in the face. And right after that, he heard a voice saying, "Get out." So then Father Ray finishes the job and goes back to his house, and when he gets there, he starts feeling extremely sick. He has a high fever and his hand has burn marks all over it. And right after this first incident with the priest, the Lutz family started experiencing some really creepy events. It all started with this really odd, untraceable smell that drifted through the entire home, and they had absolutely no idea where it came from. George also claimed that there were really unsettling and disturbing noises around the house, and just like the smell, he had no idea where it came from. At night, the front door would slam so hard that the entire family would wake up in fear. And despite George leaving a fireplace burning all day long, the house was always extremely cold and it was impossible to make it any warmer. And with each day that went by, they experienced something even worse. They started finding this green, slimy substance on the carpet floor for absolutely no reason. They had no idea what it was, but it just appeared and then it disappeared. George also claimed that his wife, Katie, was physically transformed into this weird-looking old lady with like really wrinkly face and gray hair. So kind of remembering what Butch said, that he saw his mom and didn't recognize her, maybe that's what he saw as well. And George said that it seemed like the house was feeding from her soul. And then there was the recurring awakenings at 3:15 a.m., the exact time where the murders happened. They would always wake up at the exact same time every night. And one night, George woke up hearing his kids' bed frames smashing against the floor, but he was completely frozen, unable to move at all, and all he could hear was the slamming noise over and over and over again. And the next night, he woke up the same way. He was unable to move, but all he could see was his wife levitating from the bed. Now, after this event of his wife levitating, that was the final straw for them, and they decided to get everything they had and leave. They literally left all of their clothes, all of their nice furniture that they had, and they just took what they needed and left the house. They couldn't bear one more hour under that roof because they were terrified that if they stayed even a second more, something terrible was gonna happen. But their intention wasn't even to leave for good. They were convinced that they could get rid of whatever evil entity was lurking in the house. So they moved into Kattie's mom's house temporarily until they could figure out how to, exorcise the house or whatever they do. But they soon realized that whatever was hunting them before followed them. At Kattie's mom's house, they started seeing that weird green slime substance all over the stairs. And one night, again, George and Kattie levitated from their bed. And that's when they decided to never return to 112 Ocean Avenue. Now, I'm sure most of you are looking at me like I'm crazy and that this story is absolutely bonkers. And it sounds horrifying, I have to admit, but was it true? Is any of it true at all? Well, that's what we're about to find out. Remember the priest, Father Ray? Well, apparently he was never at the house. He talks in an interview that he never even met the couple in person, that he only talked to them on the phone, and that everything that George says about him going in, saying to not sleep on Dawn's room, the whole thing about being slapped on the face by the ghost, that never happened. So, okay, clearly the story with the priest was a lie, but was everything else also a lie? Or was this all an attempt for the Lutz family to, create a paranormal story and profit out of it? And also profit from the tragic murders that literally just happened. So in 1977, a book by Jay Anson comes out, and I'm sure if you're a horror fan, you know this book, which is the Amityville Horror, and this is where the story of the Lutz family is told. But surprise, surprise, the family profited $100,000 from this book being launched, and they also profited an extra $100,000 when the movie franchise was launched. So yeah, I don't know about you, but I really do not believe everything that they said. And again, it is very possible that something could have happened, some weird paranormal activity that we can't prove 100%. But it seems that even if it did, it doesn't really matter, because what happened here was just a way of making money, basically. And it feels kind of weird to me that they were just doing all of this knowing the horrible, tragic murders that happened in the house. And it feels kind of disrespectful, but yep, that's what they done. And Later, in 2012, one of the kids, Daniel, comes out with a documentary that's called My Amityville Horror. And I 100% recommend it. It's really interesting. It's kind of another take on what happened. And he explains how this entire thing literally damaged his mental health so much, because he grew up as a young kid dealing with a dad that was really obsessed with the paranormal. And nothing wrong with that, but if you're a kid, I'm sure that terrifies you. And this whole thing at the house, he also claims in the documentary that it was all a hoax, and that it really messed him up to have to deal with all of this. And I'm sure that as a kid, he didn't even understand that it wasn't real, or that his family was trying to profit from this. But imagine how terrifying it must have been living in the house as well. Like, it's just really, really horrible. I can't imagine being 7 years old and living at a house where someone got killed. Like, that's crazy. So yeah, there's no scientific evidence to, support the story that the Lutz family told. But as we know, paranormal things, there's no scientific proof anyways, so I don't know. People believe what they want to believe, and it's I guess I'll believe it when I see it. If it's true, I do kind of believe in a few paranormal things, but I don't know. In this case, it just feels kind of icky. It feels suspicious. And the real tragedy wasn't the Lutz case, it was the DeFeo family and how their lives were taken so horribly. And the Amityville house is still standing to this day, and it has been renovated. It had quite a few different owners and a few people that ended up moving out really quickly, but I don't think it's because of paranormal activity. I think it's mostly because there are a lot of, tourists and horror lovers that ended up going and checking out the house, and it must have been really annoying. But the address of the house also changed to 108 Ocean Avenue. I don't think that even matters. And the whole point of changing the address was to, avoid people coming over, but the address was leaked anyways. So I don't think it didn't make any difference. So people will still show up, I guess. I don't know if they still do. But the house is currently privately owned, and the person that lives there says they never experienced any single paranormal events. So yeah, what do you guys think? Was it all paranormal? Was it a hoax? Was Butch DeFeo possessed? Was it just a plan all along with his sister? Did he do it by himself? Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and also what you like me to cover next. So yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for watching. Bye!